Florida's Space Coast, this is your career.
Welcome to Your Career. I'm Debbie Featherston, your host, and with me today is Kathryn Creedy. And Kathryn is a communication expert, and we're going to be talking about careers and communication in a little while, but this segment is going to be totally focused on careers in aviation.
Yes, and
so
that's an excellent topic because there's never been a better time in history to join the aviation industry, and there are so many opportunities available right across the board, from IT to aviation maintenance technicians to pilots, et cetera. So my background is I've been an aviation journalist since the 1970s, and I created a publication focusing in on the regional airlines. And then I've been a freelancer since I left that organization, and now I freelance for about 7 different publications around the world. All of them are aviation, and they cover airports and airlines and business aviation and business jets and right across the board, everything from airline finance right down to how an aircraft is made.
how did you actually get into aviation?
Well, I was my father was with Pan Am when I was growing up, and I knew I wanted to go into aviation, but I knew I wasn't strong in math. Well, I bought that I wasn't strong in math, and so I wanted to become a writer, and everybody said I wrote very well, and so my father taught me how to write, and then I got into aviation journalism in the 80s, and I've been there ever since and loved it. It's a fabulous, fabulous opportunity for anybody. It's a great industry.
Yeah, well, I'm a real aviation nut. So I was just really delighted when I contacted you to learn that you had not only the expertise in journalism and communication, but aviation. So, you know, when you think about aviation, you said this is a really great time to be talking about aviation. What are some of the changes that you're seeing in the industry right now?
Well, we have a huge cohort of baby boomers who are retiring. And so just to give you an idea, in the next decade, 42% of all commercial pilots will be retiring in the United States. So we will need 600,000 plus commercial pilots in the next 20 years around the world. During that same time period, we're going to need 117,000 in the United States, and we don't have. We've kind of lost the interest in aviation that we've had in the past, and so young people are not coming up into aviation. They've seen the uproar in the industry, but now we have a very, very stable industry. So not only is the industry stable and the management extremely good, with great returns on investment and higher salaries for pilots and maintenance technicians and everybody, it means that there's job security as well. So the industry is really trying to get people focused back on entering the industry and getting interested in the industry. And that's why I say it's never been a better time, because the industry is receptive to all of these people who want to get into it, and we know that there's not enough. Just to give you an example, with 42% of all U.S. pilots retiring, or commercial pilots retiring, that's about 22,000 pilots. The entire regional airline industry employs about 19,000. So today, even if every college and every flight school graduated numerous pilots, we still would have a shortage. And the same is true of aviation maintenance technicians, again, because baby boomers are retiring. And this is not your grease monkey field. It is a high-tech diagnostic field, and I just did a story on this for low-fare and regional airlines, and one of the people who is looking for aviation maintenance technicians said that people wonder whether they should steer their child into maintenance, and I can't think of a better career than ensuring the safety of every single airplane that takes off.
Let's before you go too much further, let's talk about the 2 occupations that you've mentioned that are within the industry. Everybody knows about a pilot, so let's start with with the aviation maintenance? Because I think that's a role that really has changed a lot, right?
Yes, it's changed a great deal, and much of it is computerized diagnostics. We have it's digitized so that there's a constant flow of data. So we need analysts to analyze that data, and the data is coming in even as the airplane is in flight, so that they can troubleshoot an aircraft when it gets on the ground, or they can schedule it, or they can schedule in another aircraft if there's a major problem. But so it's really a high-tech field, and we're going to need 600,000 aviation maintenance technicians worldwide in the next 20 years. And so, and this is not only a high-tech field; it's good, solid job security and good, solid salaries. So these are two things that we want for our children: good, solid job security and salaries. And so this is an ideal thing for anybody who's inclined towards maintenance or technology to pursue that field.
Yeah, yeah. That's always interesting to me. And what about the education? How do they go about getting it? I mean, we've got a lot of STEM programs in the high school. That might be a great place to start, but I would imagine that there's some, you know, classes or some schools that are really specializing in this type of education.
We have many aviation colleges, universities in this country, and we're blessed to have that. And we have something called the University Aviation Association, and you can find out more just by going on there, by Googling them. But aviation is really a great nexus between industry and business and school and education, because, you know, this is the STEM technology that everybody wants. They want science, technology, engineering, and math. And when they say engineering, yes, the engineering is very big, but for an aviation technician, it doesn't mean you have to be an engineer. It means that, yes, you have to go to school, but vocational education needs to be part of that mix that we're telling our students about.
Right. Yeah, so it could be more that technologist, engineering technologist type of a level, or technician in this particular case.
Yeah. And they are technicians.
Right.
They're no longer grease monkeys. And, you know, I was talking to a guidance counselor not too long ago on this very subject, and she said, I don't think I could advise my parents to let their students be a grease monkey. And I went, wait a minute.
Wow.
we have to discuss this, because they are technicians. They are high-tech diagnostic technicians.
So they're like going in when I take my car into the dealership, you know, if there's a particular, depending on what I say is going, if it's not just an oil change, but they need to do some diagnostics on it. They'll plug a computer into the car and to interpret the other 27 computers that are in there, running and processing, and so it's the same kind of thing.
It's very
depending
similar.
on the system.
Yeah, it's very
they're
similar, but it's a little bit more advanced than that, because now all the manufacturers are developing technologies where the aircraft is sending out information and data all the time.
All the time.
And that makes the IT profession extremely sought after, because we need analysis of this data, so we need analysts for that data as well. Plus, airlines are redoing their computer reservation systems, and they need IT specialists for that. So, and when I talk to industry HR people, they say these are the top 3 that we're looking for: IT, aviation maintenance technicians, and pilots.
That's great. And what about the pilots? Because the pilots, that can be a very long journey. Has there been any change in terms of the requirements, how one gets started?
Well, there's very little change. There's been a lot of changes, but those are being addressed that make it longer. But those are being addressed, and you know, it's very expensive to become a pilot. But one of the statistics I read early on for a story that I was doing on this very issue was for every dollar you invest in your career, i.e. your education, you get $3 in return. So we're now talking about senior pilots with $300,000 salaries or $350,000 salaries. We're talking about junior pilots. I'm talking about first officers at regional airlines making between $60,000 and $80,000 in their first year.
In their first year.
So that's equivalent to what a lawyer makes in their first year in a small town, but in a big city, they'll be making much more. But So we're starting to see the salaries meet the expectations of the students. And so even though it is a long haul to become a pilot, it's given the demand and the shortage, the employee, the prospective employee, is really in the catbird seat for the first time, probably since the beginning of aviation.
I can think of a couple different friends that I have that are pilots today, and the journey that they took, right? The years in school, and then getting a charter job, or just whatever the jobs were to get because they had to get certain hours and different types of aircraft to get those certifications and finally work up into the big commercial aircraft, right? So it was very long, and they starved.
Yes, they did.
They didn't get paid well. I mean, they really just didn't get paid well.
Well, no, they didn't. And now that's completely changed because of the shortage. And the shortage is for everything from the initial pilot for a charter company all the way up to your banner towing pilot. It's all, the shortages across the board. And so, as I said, there's never been a better time to get into the aviation industry in whatever career you want to pursue. But it is long, and there are many in the industry trying to change that. We can no longer have people going from private pilot's license to recreational to all these different pilot's licenses that have nothing to do with flying an airliner. We need to cut to the chase. We need to change it. And I just was at a conference in London in which many of the changes that people were pushing for were explained in great detail and are being adopted. They've already been adopted around the world. We're one of the few places in the world that hasn't adopted them yet. So it doesn't, it shortens the path, but doesn't shorten the quality of the education that these young people need in order to take command of an airliner.
Yeah, I think about the safety, right? That we don't want to. There's certain shortcuts I'm sure that the FAA wouldn't approve.
No, and nor would the industry.
And nor the industry, because it would be very costly because of, people not being prepared.
Right,
so
exactly.
I'm sure they're looking at all those trade-offs.
And they are looking at all those trade-offs. And in the last decade, we've seen a lot of new things being added to the curriculum, like roll-up set, stall recovery instead of stall avoidance, things like that. So it's many new things are being added to the curriculum to ensure a higher level of safety for every single pilot graduating, whether they have 250 hours or they have 30,000 hours and have never gone through that.
Yeah. And then, of course, what does the journey look like for somebody that's maybe flown as a military pilot and coming into the...
Well, they're very much in demand.
I would imagine.
Yeah, so they are, and the Air Force, as a matter of fact, has a huge pilot shortage problem, and they're developing bonuses and retention bonuses and sign-up bonuses, just as the airlines are. For instance, one airline is offering $20,000 sign-up bonus and a $20,000 retention bonus. So that will go a long way to paying down the debt of your education. But for the military pilot, and the Air Force has said very bluntly to Congress that this is affecting our readiness. So we need pilots, we need aircraft maintenance technicians, we need all of these fields, and because the demand is so high in the commercial and the civil industry that they're just coming out and going into the commercial aviation industry.
That's great. Kathryn, what can you tell us about the health of the industry as a whole? Because you said that aviation is much more stable, it's much more vibrant, right?
Well, this is another reason it's a great time, because since deregulation in 1978, we've had ups and downs, cyclicality in the aviation industry, where you have good years and bad years. You have new entrants coming in, you have new competition, et cetera. And from deregulation to about 2010, that's about 40 years. We had a lot of bankruptcies, a lot of going out of business, a lot of consolidation, et cetera. Well, with the Great Recession, the airline management really said, we have to, starting with Alaska Airlines, we have to plan for the downturn. We have to manage our airline so that we can make it in the downturn, that we have a 15% return on our invested capital in the downturn. So a very ambitious goal, but every single one of the major carriers, through consolidation and changing management practices, has developed a new mantra in which they want 15% return on invested capital, because they know they have to expand, they know they have to grow, but they also know that they have to watch the bottom line because they can't go up and down anymore. They have to be steady. They have to be profitable in the downturn, as many other industries are. It was the only industry that was not, did not have an effort to be profitable in the downturn. So now it's extremely healthy. People are investing, and Warren Buffett is now investing in the airlines, and other people are investing in the airlines. It has a huge following among analysts on Wall Street, and so this is a first, just in the last decade, I would say, that people are beginning to look at airlines as a stable industry and not the cyclical up and down and going out of business. And we still have a lot of competition, but we have good, healthy airlines, every single one.
Yeah, we need the competition just to keep companies accountable, I would imagine, and just make certain that the standards don't slip.
Yes, yes.
So tell me a little bit more, if you, based on what you know, around the purchasing of new aircraft. That's been a concern, I know, for some, is that when you look at the industry, that you had an aging fleet.
Yes, and in the last decade, the airlines have almost completely changed out their fleets. The 747 has been retired. I think United just had its last flight.
Wow.
MD-88 is coming out of the American fleet. There are many, so we're moving toward much newer fleets, much younger fleets. So the oldest aircraft are about 15 to 20 years old, but even those are being retired, and airlines are refleeting around the world. So this is huge for Boeing and Airbus, and two people that people haven't really heard of is Bombardier in Canada and Embraer in Brazil.
Sure.
And we know Embraer in Brevard County because it has a huge manufacturing facility. It assembles 4 aircraft at the Melbourne airport, and is contributing untold millions to our economy.
Right.
And is a great place to be employed. And Eastern Florida State College partnered with Embraer in order to bring those production facilities up to speed by training their students.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to bring up the manufacturing of aircraft and just the sales of the aircraft, because to me that is still part of this industry. It's another segment of the aviation industry.
Yes, it is.
Right.
And we're going to need hundreds of thousands, if not thousands of thousands of aircraft in the next 20 years around the world, because as developing nations enter the developed nations, they get a middle class, and that middle class wants to travel, and that's driving the demand for more and more aircraft. So, and we have newer aircraft coming on, and more highly technical aircraft, so that you have them made out of composites like the 787, and so they're pushing the boundaries there, and it's very exciting, and that's another reason I love covering aviation, because there's always something new, and it's always something very exciting.
So the industry is really beginning to thrive, and I'm delighted to see that as an aviation enthusiast myself. But it's the one thing I'm curious about. We talked about the 3 or 4 positions, right, that are really the ones that they're seeking. But I think it's also important to remind people that when we look at aviation, there's a lot of other positions that are there, and just due to natural attrition, you're going to see openings in logistics and purchasing, and
absolutely, absolutely. And it's not just in commercial aviation.
No.
The demand is high in business aviation as well, like the Embraer executive jets. But also, in fact, its Phenom 300 is the most delivered aircraft in the world in the business aviation market. It has a lot going for it, that company over there in Melbourne. across the board, as you see baby boomers retire, you're going to need people in there to do
Right.
all of those things. And the technology may change that a little, but the basics are not going to change that much.
Yeah.
So and so corporate pilots and corporate flight attendants and fixed base operations and all of that. It's all going to boom in the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah, that's phenomenal to hear. What about when you think about aviation? What do you think some of the challenges might someone new to the industry face as they try to enter the industry?
Well, one of the biggest challenges, I think, is becoming a pilot because, as you say, it's a long, involved process now, and it involves college and lots of money, and of course, time. And of course, any college education involves a whole lot of money that is shocking, but it's more for a pilot. That's the biggest challenge. But also, for young people wanting to get into it, they really need to start in. Here's a statistic that I just found out when I went to this conference in London. The average person in aviation is hooked by the age of 6. So,
Wow.
which I was hooked at the age of 4. So we need to get people introduced into aviation in grade school, not just high school or middle school.
Yeah.
We need to really remember that that's when that fascination really takes off.
Yeah.
And right now, most people are drawn to aviation because they know somebody in aviation.
Right.
Now we want people to understand that this is a great career, that we need to get lots of people attracted to it, and you could be a writer.
Right.
You could be an aviation journalist, as I am. There's a ton of us around, and so I think that the biggest challenge is getting trained up. But the industry is working with education, like Eastern Florida State College and Aviation University Association, University Aviation Association, so that those partnerships are developing, and the airlines are creating partnerships with community colleges to identify young people who would want to go into aviation, whether it's a maintenance technician or an IT or a pilot or whatever, and they're bringing up through community colleges so they can cut the cost of that education by going to community colleges exponentially. Yeah. So
I think that's a great point, that people need to remember the community colleges certainly can be a great avenue and a more cost-effective path.
Absolutely.
But it's still, they're going to get that quality education that
yes,
they need.
Yes, yes.
Good
And
point.
when you see the partnerships that have been developed, such as what Embraer Executive Jets did with Eastern Florida State College, those things are being done around the country. I'm sure that's being done in Savannah with Gulfstream and in Charleston with, in fact, I know it's being done in Charleston with Boeing, and of course Washington has always been there. So. I think what needs to happen is the aviation community needs to reach out to the education community, and the education community needs to reach back. And I'm talking about Brevard Public Schools. They are trying to develop lots of STEM programs.
Well, that's all of our schools across Central Florida.
Right, exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly. So I think that the challenge is creating those partnerships to actually get the job done. But everybody's on board. Just sign me up is all I ever hear.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the things that's been needed for some time, is that we needed to get the employers and the educators at the table, so they could really communicate and understand, here are the skill sets and the specific knowledge that we need, right? And the competencies, right? This is what we really need when they come out of school.
And that's how education is going, 100%.
Right, it needs to be that way.
We need to know what those competencies are. For instance, when I first started out, I wanted to become a journalist, but I knew J School was not a good idea because the editors were telling the J Schools, we can't use your people because we have to unteach them all the theory that you taught them. So within a decade, J Schools had actually adopted all the recommendations of the newspapers, and therefore, so now we're seeing that in other disciplines such as aviation and any other discipline. You want to know ahead of time what core competencies you need, and start getting them into the student much earlier than we are. The Europeans are already doing that.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you've seen or heard of that seems to be working to introduce or increase the exposure that young people have?
Well, one, my favorite is there's an organization called Women in Aviation, and I happen to be a member. And I have so much time for Women in Aviation because they do such great things. And women are only about 5% of the pilot corps, so we need more and more and more and more. So women and people of color, Hispanics, there's an organization for black pilots, there's an organization for Hispanic pilots. Get involved in those organizations, and because they're already there for you. And for the underprivileged, there's an organization in Melbourne who is working to develop STEM programs for those kids who don't have all the opportunities of a middle-class child. So they're actually working with the Brevard County School District as well. And I think that's the path we need to put these kids on, whether they're from middle class or working class or whatever. This is a path to success for them, aviation.
I think anytime you can expose an individual while they're young and just help them to really embrace it, the more they're going to be able, because aviation, I mean, they could get their pilot's license by the time they're 15, 16.
Right? Exactly.
And
exactly. Yeah.
Really just keep growing and building their skill set and knowledge. That's great. Yeah. Kathryn, thank you. You've been a wealth of information.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
It's a pleasure. Well, on behalf of my guest and everyone here on the set of Your Career, thank you for watching, and remember, be career happy.
More information about this program is available online at millermediagroup.org.